The architectural history of Innsbruck, nestled in the heart of the Alps, within river cuts through a dramatic mountain valley, lies the city of Innsbruck. At first glance, Innsbruck feels like a postcard come to life. Snow-capped peaks, colorful facades, and church towers rising against the sky. But behind this beauty is a long and layered architectural story, shaped by geography, politics, religion, and the daily lives of the people who called this place home. Innsbruck's architecture is not the result of one single style or era. Instead, it is a living timeline. Roman foundations sit beneath medieval streets. Gothic churches stand beside Baroque palaces. Imperial buildings share space with modern Alpine design. Every stone, arch, and roof tells a story of survival, ambition, and adaptation in a challenging mountain environment. This is the architectural history of Innsbruck, a city shaped by trade routes, empires, faith, and the Alps themselves. 1. Roman roots and the birth of settlement. The story of Innsbruck begins long before the city had a name. During Roman times, the Alpine region was not an isolated wilderness. It was a vital corridor connecting northern Europe with Italy. The Romans understood the strategic importance of this valley and built roads that crossed the Brenner Pass, one of the most important mountain routes in Europe. Near present-day Innsbruck, Roman engineers established small settlements and military posts. These early structures were practical rather than grand. Stone foundations, timber roofs, and simple rectangular plans. Architecture here focused on durability and function, designed to withstand cold winters and serve travelers, soldiers, and traders. Though few Roman buildings survive above ground today, archaeological evidence shows that Innsbruck's urban layout followed Roman logic. Roads aligned with trade routes, buildings clustered near river crossings, and infrastructure built to support movement and commerce. This Roman sense of order laid the groundwork for everything that followed. 2. The medieval city, Innsbruck, takes shape. Innsbruck, as we know it, truly emerged during the Middle Ages. Its name comes from a simple but powerful idea: the bridge over the Inn River. This bridge transformed the area into a key stop on the north-south trade route between Germany and Italy. By the 12th and 13th centuries, Innsbruck had grown into a fortified town. Medieval architecture here was defensive, compact, and vertical. Buildings were built close together, forming narrow streets that could be easily protected. Stone walls, gates, and towers surrounded the town, creating a clear boundary between safety inside and danger outside. Houses were tall and narrow, often with storage and workshops on the ground floor and living spaces above. Roofs were steep to shed snow, and windows were small to retain heat. These practical choices shaped Innsbruck's medieval skyline. At the heart of the city stood churches and civic buildings. Gothic architecture dominated this period, with pointed arches, ribbed vaults, and tall spires reaching upward. One of the most important examples is Innsbruck Cathedral, originally built in the Gothic style before later transformations. Medieval Innsbruck was not grand in the imperial sense, but was busy, strategic, and alive. 3. Gothic faith and civic pride. Religion played a central role in shaping Innsbruck's medieval architecture. Churches were more than places of worship. They were symbols of identity, wealth, and protection. Gothic architecture thrived in Innsbruck because it suited both the spiritual and practical needs of the city. Tall windows allowed more light into dark interiors. Stone vaults were strong enough to handle heavy snow loads. Towers served both religious and defensive purposes. Inside these churches, architecture worked together with art. Frescoes covered walls. Altars were richly carved, and stained glass told biblical stories to a largely illiterate population. Even today, traces of medieval frescoes can be found beneath later layers of paint. Civic pride also expressed itself architecturally. Town halls, guild houses, and market buildings featured decorative facades and symbolic details. Architecture became a way for citizens to say, "We matter, we belong here." For the Habsburg era, Innsbruck becomes imperial. The biggest transformation in Innsbruck's architectural history came with the arrival of the Habsburg dynasty. In the late Middle Ages and early Renaissance, Innsbruck became an important residence of the Habsburg rulers. This new status changed everything. Imperial architecture demanded scale, elegance, and symbolism. Buildings were no longer just functional. They were statements of power. One of the most famous landmarks from this era is the Golden Roof, or Golden Stachel, built in the early 16th century for Emperor Maximilian I. This ornate balcony features more than 2,600 fire-gilded copper tiles. It was designed not as a home, but as a stage, allowing the emperor to appear before crowds during festivals and tournaments. Architecturally, the Golden Roof marks the transition from Gothic to Renaissance influences. The structure combines medieval building techniques with Renaissance ornamentation, reflecting a city caught between old traditions and new ideas. Nearby, imperial palaces and administrative buildings began to reshape Innsbruck's urban core. These buildings were larger, more symmetrical, and richly decorated, signaling Innsbruck's new role as a center of political power. 5. Renaissance order and humanism. The Renaissance brought new architectural values to Innsbruck: balance, proportion, and classical inspiration. While the city never became a pure Renaissance showcase like Florence or Rome, these ideas blended with local traditions to create a unique Alpine interpretation. Palaces and noble residences featured symmetrical facades, arched windows, and decorative stonework. Courtyards became more refined, often featuring arcades and frescoes. Architecture began to focus on harmony rather than height alone. One important Renaissance influence can be seen in Ambras Castle, located just outside the city center. Though originally medieval, it was transformed into a Renaissance palace under Archduke Ferdinand II. The castle's orderly layout, elegant halls, and art collections reflect Renaissance ideals of learning, beauty, and power. Innsbruck during this period became a cultural crossroads, where Italian Renaissance ideas met Germanic building traditions, all adapted to Alpine conditions. 6. Baroque drama and Catholic power. The 17th and 18th centuries ushered in the Baroque era, a time of drama, emotion, and grandeur. Baroque architecture in Innsbruck was closely tied to the Catholic Church and the Counter-Reformation. Baroque buildings were designed to inspire awe. Churches became theatrical spaces filled with light, movement, and ornament. Curved facades, domes, stucco decoration, and ceiling frescoes created an emotional experience meant to strengthen faith. Innsbruck Cathedral, rebuilt in the Baroque style, is a perfect example. From the outside, it appears relatively restrained, but inside, it opens into a rich world of frescoes, gilded altars, and soaring spaces. Architecture here works together with painting and sculpture to guide the eye and the soul upward. Secular architecture also adopted Baroque elements. Palaces and administrative buildings gained grand staircases, elaborate entrances, and decorative gardens. The city's appearance softened, becoming more expressive and ceremonial. Baroque Innsbruck was no longer just a strategic city. It was a stage for faith and authority. 7. Everyday architecture and Alpine adaptation. While palaces and churches often dominate history books, everyday buildings tell an equally important story. Innsbruck's residential architecture evolved slowly, shaped by climate, materials, and tradition. Wood and stone remained the primary building materials. Houses featured thick walls for insulation, deep eaves to protect from snow, and colorful painted facades that brightened long winters. Many buildings combined living spaces with workshops or storage areas, reflecting a practical way of life. Balconies, often decorated with flowers, became a defining feature of Innsbruck's streetscape. These were not just decorative, they provided light, air, and a connection to the outdoors. This vernacular architecture created a strong visual identity, one that still defines Innsbruck today. 8. The 19th century. Modernity arrives. The 19th century brought major change. Industrialization, railways, and new political ideas transformed Innsbruck's architecture. The arrival of the railway connected Innsbruck more closely to the rest of Europe. New station hotels and infrastructure projects reshaped the city's edges. Architecture became larger in scale and more standardized. Historicism dominated this era. Architects looked back to earlier styles, Gothic, Renaissance, Baroque, and reinterpreted them using modern materials and techniques. This resulted in grand public buildings with ornate facades and symbolic references to the past. Examples include schools, government buildings, and theaters that projected stability and progress. These structures often featured symmetrical layouts, monumental entrances, and decorative sculptures. At the same time, new residential districts expanded beyond the medieval core, introducing wider streets and planned neighborhoods. 9. Early 20th century. Between tradition and innovation. The early 20th century was a time of tension between tradition and modernity. Architects in Innsbruck experimented with new ideas while respecting the city's historic character. Art Nouveau influences appeared in decorative details, curved lines, floor motifs, and expressive facades. However, these styles were often toned down to suit local tastes and Alpine sensibilities. After World War I, economic challenges limited large-scale construction, but architecture became more functional. Simpler forms, reduced ornament, and practical layouts reflected changing social values. Still, Innsbruck avoided extreme architectural breaks. The city evolved carefully, balancing innovation with continuity. 10. Post-war architecture and Olympic transformation. The most dramatic modern transformation of Innsbruck came in the mid-20th century, especially with the Winter Olympics of 1964 and 1976. These global events pushed Innsbruck onto the world stage and required new infrastructure: sports venues, hotels, transport systems, and housing. Modernist architecture played a key role. Buildings from this era emphasized function, clarity, and structural honesty. Concrete, glass, and steel became common. Designs were clean and bold, yet often shaped to echo the surrounding mountains. The Olympic ski jump, cable car stations, and sports halls became modern landmarks. While controversial at first, many of these structures are now seen as important chapters in Innsbruck's architectural story. 11. Contemporary Innsbruck. Past meets future. Today, Innsbruck is a city where history and modern design coexist. Contemporary architects face a unique challenge: how to build something new without overpowering centuries of heritage. Modern buildings in Innsbruck often use minimalist forms, sustainable materials, and energy-efficient technologies. Glass facades reflect the mountains. Clean lines contrast with historic ornamentation, yet harmony is carefully maintained. Projects like modern university buildings, cultural centers, and transport hubs show how Innsbruck continues to evolve while respecting its past. The city has become a model for how historic cities can grow responsibly. 12. A city written in stone and snow. Innsbruck's architecture is not frozen in time. It is a living story, written by Romans, medieval merchants, emperors, priests, engineers, and modern architects. What makes Innsbruck unique is not one single building or style, but the way everything fits together. Gothic spires rise behind Baroque domes. Imperial balconies overlook modern streets. Alpine houses sit beside Olympic structures. The mountains frame it all, reminding us that architecture here has always been a dialogue between human ambition and natural power. Innsbruck is more than a beautiful city. It is a history book built in stone, wood, and copper, one that continues to add new chapters with every generation. And as long as people continue to cross the bridge over the Inn, the story of Innsbruck's architecture will continue to unfold.